everybody, welcome back to Andertons TV. I've got a very, very special guest today coming in on Zoom. It's a guitar player that, I've got to be honest with you, Pete and I, big fans of Eric's work over the last few years. Jack, our keyboard presenter, has been following you for about 20 years, consuming all your music. So super excited to welcome you to Andertons. So Eric Krasno.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks for taking the time.
No, not at all, man. I mean, fantastically talented musician, Grammy Award winning, solo artist, worked with a host of other, big celebrity musicians. And we're kind of here today, really, thanks to the guys at Dangelico, because Eric has a new signature guitar, which is exciting. But yes, my first thing I must say is thank you so much for getting up very early your time and getting dressed and being ready for what is, I imagine, a pre-breakfast interview for you.
You know what? Actually, I already made breakfast for my 2-year-old, and he's already at daycare. So I've had a full morning already. So it's all right.
The joys of young children, yes. Where lay-ins and regular morning starts are a thing of the past.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for having me.
Tell me about, I think for people that maybe are less familiar with your stuff, recently you've had some fantastic success with your solo albums, and prior to that, obviously you were in the Soulive band and Lettuce and more. It's been an interesting transformation for you. You seem to have gone from a sort of a small sort of jazzy 3-piecey kind of vibe into perhaps a more of a mainstream sort of, bluesy poppy kind of vibe. Tell us about that sort of journey and the different things that have perhaps formulated your approach to playing guitar.
Well, I grew up on Hendrix and Stevie Ray Vaughan and hip hop and Stevie Wonder and pop, the Beatles, and that was what I was in my record collection as a kid. That's what my dad played and what I listened to. I think Hendrix and Zeppelin kind of were mine, but my dad, a lot of Motown and jazz. And so, when I met the Soulive guys, it's funny, 'cause a lot of people know me for that, but really that was a sidebar, really. I was familiar with that, with like organ trio, soul jazz, but that definitely wasn't the definition of kind of where I saw myself going as a musician. I was doing a lot of production. I was working, I had a studio with my former roommate, Jeff Basker, who actually is a amazing producer and gone on to do incredible things. And so when Soulive started, they really had the concept of the organ trio, and I played a Strat at the time. I bought a plywood $50 hollow body guitar, semi-hollow, on the way to our first rehearsal/recording session, because I was like, I better get something that seems right, So I in the very beginning there, I was kind of just trying to catch up to what the Evans brothers kind of already had going, and it kind of took off quickly. We did a lot of work and we toured, but on the side, I was always making other records, producing with other people, writing with other people. And it wasn't till many years later that I made those records under my own name, but I was always on the side, like writing songs and doing more of like I did a lot of hip hop production, a lot of pop stuff. So I feel like in the last few years, I've kind of tried to take all the elements of all the different things I'd been working on and put them into my own records and my own projects.
Who were you drawing on then for influences when the Soulive thing came along? Because it's like you say, those kind of it's not a traditional sort of heavy guitar-led kind of vibe in those bands. Right. So I would imagine a lot of your mainstream guitar heroes weren't the kind of people you could draw inspiration from.
Yeah, I was a big Schofield fan, and around the time Soulive started, A Go-Go had come out with Medeski, Martin, and Wood, and that was a big one. I loved that record. But then, I listened to some Grant Green, and I was into Wes Montgomery a lot as a younger kid. But then, when I got into Soulive, I really dug into Lonnie Smith and those records with Grant Green. Grant Green was a huge one. I just loved how rhythmic and tasty he was, and it really came from the blues, but then he had all of that bebop stuff together. And then, you know, I'm trying to think who else. I mean, early George Benson was like the kind of pinnacle of like playing that tasty, soulful, like bebop meets jazz meets soul meets blues, you know. But all along, you know, I was trying to incorporate the stuff that I really grew up on, which was, again, Hendrix, Stevie Ray Vaughan, B.B. King, like the blues guys. That was the stuff that really resonated with me when I first picked up the guitar, you know.
I think that's I've got this, I love the reaction that I get when I listen to your music. And this, to be fair, this has gone in through your sort of solo stuff as well, which is there'll be some really kind of, what's the right word? There'll be this really appropriate but slightly sort of jazzy vibe to what you're playing, but then you'll always kind of bring it back to sort of resolve into some sort of nice little blues kind of, you know, my comfort blanket kind of lick comes back in at some point.
Yeah.
But you blend those two styles. I mean, I would say as well as anybody that I think I've heard, you know, playing the guitar, and it's a real. It's really refreshing to hear, because I think as a guitar player, if it's all jazz, sometimes it's you know, it's difficult sometimes to relate to. If it's all the time, is something a little bit off the wall, and if it's all classic poppy blues stuff, it gets a bit predictable. But I think I love that about your playing, is that, you know, you're always kind of going, oh, I didn't see that coming. I like that. And again, is that something that you can? I don't know, did you have like a formal guitar training when you were growing up, or you self-taught?
You know, not really, not like a through line of someone, but I took various lessons. And I mean, really the most of it, honestly, was I was so fortunate to be around great players. You know, that was,
right.
And that is something I always say to young musicians, is surround yourself with people that are just better than you, you know, and it can hurt your ego, but it's like, you know, I got to play with John Scofield when I was like in my early 20s and just get my ass whooped, you know, and that does a lot, man. And you know, being around the Lettuce guys and the Soulive guys, you know, I was young when I met all of them, so, and they were just straight up better than me, you know, and so being around them and that fueled this like fire, you know, of like, okay, I gotta like bring it if I'm playing with these guys. And I'm still to this day, that's still the case. You know, I love being around people that inspire me and push me, you know. But you articulated that very well, what you said about that kind of combination of that warm blanket of the soul and the blues thing, and incorporating some other things to take you out of there. I mean, that was always the stuff that I loved about people like Scofield or George Benson, was that they came back to like a very lyrical, soulful kind of place, but they could incorporate these other concepts where you went, oh, whoa, and like that. And in certain cases, those concepts ended up like kind of defining their sound. You know, and then with Scofield and a lot of those, and B.B. King and any of those guys, it's like the thing that drew me to them was that, you know, their sound instantly. You know, they have that touch and that tone that it's just, you know, you know the second you put that on, oh man, that's BB, you know.
Yeah, the George Benson is, I think, probably, I can see that influence, because I think he also was another one of those kind of jazz greats that could incorporate other styles of perhaps more relatable licks and vibes to it.
Yeah.
I saw him, he looked so young in this clip I saw him. I reckon he must have been in his 20s, but playing with Chet Atkins on Instagram. It came up as a video, and it, you know, again, you could see he was so comfortable kind of just going between the blues and jazz.
Yeah.
And he, again, very, very, yeah, I can see that kind of influence, I suppose. Tell me about your kind of career. I sort of get the impression that you're not necessarily the guy that wants to be front and center all the time. You know, the fact that you're quite happy producing, writing, being you know, a sort of, you know, not necessarily pushing yourself towards the front until maybe more recently with your own solo stuff. Is that a conscious decision? You know, are you sort of, you know, sort of very modest sort of person that's sort of quite happy to sort of just contribute rather than be front and center?
That's a great question. You know, I wouldn't say it's a conscious decision. It's been kind of a natural thing, you know, and what happened with starting to make solo records and leading the band and singing and stuff was really out of kind of having a lot of songs. I mean, I kind of came into it with I was writing all these songs. I wanted all these artists to play the songs, to sing the songs. Like, even I was producing other people, and also that first record I made called Blood from a Stone, my intention was to have all these other people sing on that record. I was always writing. I've always had like a studio in my place or somewhere, and where I've been working in there. And when I'm not producing a record, I just continue to work, you know, and I'm continue to write songs. And it didn't always have a place with Lettuce or Soulive or the other people I was working with. You know, it was really when I was doing a lot of the Tedeschi Trucks records, I started just digging in and just writing all the time. And so when I had a bunch of songs left over, I was like, well, I want to record these, you know. And originally, the first time I did that was the Nigel Hall album, Ladies and Gentlemen, Nigel Hall, which was him basically singing a lot of my songs. And then after that, I was like, you know, he started touring and doing his thing. And I just was like, I don't really want to wait anymore for singers to show up. And everyone always, I would demo the songs singing. I would always sing the songs first. And Susan and Nigel both were like, why aren't you just releasing the songs with you singing? Like, what's going on here? So Blood from a Stone was the first record where I was like, oh, well, maybe I can just do that. And then subsequently, everyone was like, well, you have to tour, you know, and if you make a record, you got to tour. So that was the evolution from there. And man, that first tour of like singing out front was rough. You know, I did not want to do it. I'm not natural. You're right. I'm not naturally that guy that just jumps out front and wants to sing, you know, but I do enjoy doing it. And I love harmonies. That's like when that vocal harmony, like chorus comes in, there's like the best feeling in the world. So, you know, I'm still that guy that I'll get out and sing the song, but when you know, the peaking and like the energy more comes from the guitar. I'm getting better at bringing that vocally, but it's, yeah, I just needed a vehicle for the songs. Yeah, I want to be in the studio. I want to be writing and producing. And when I'm out, but I do like playing in front of people. It's just like some of the travel and the wear and tear on your body, and then also like, yeah, I'd be plenty content being in the studio and making records and not being out front, you know?
Is that I always find that kind of interesting. I sort of, do you think there's an element that you think you're sort of striving for a sort of a perfect sound, and there's a worry that maybe the studio is the best environment to try and do that in, and live, there's always going to be a slightly different energy around a live performance that may not result necessarily in the perfect kind of take. And I know some artists are drawn to that energy, and others kind of go, oh gosh, you know, it's like, I am more comfortable in the studio. But I wonder, I mean, I've not seen you live in person, but, you know, I always get the impression that it's a good show. You know, I don't get the impression that, you know, that the audience feels shortchanged in any way.
Yeah, no, I love playing live. It's really a back and forth that I'm always trying to balance. It's like a continual thing, because then once I'm on stage and I'm plugged in and I'm going, like, you know, I love that feeling. It's really everything surrounding it, the traveling and the movement. Right. If I could play every night in my home, like down the street, you know, from my house, I would do that. But yeah, you know, it's, you know, and as far as the elements kind of changing every night, that used to bother me more. I feel like as I've gotten older or more road tested, I kind of welcome that challenge more, you know, of like, you know, okay, this amp, the backline amp might be crappy, but I'll get it to work, and it's fine. Maybe even find something about it that's cool, you know, that I can incorporate into an idea. You know, that was one of the, like, I remember playing with Schofield one night and the amp was super messed up and it was breaking up. And I felt so bad for him. I was like, oh man, do you want to use mine? And he was like, nah, man, check that out. When I play this one note, it cracks up. And every time I do that, I know that's going to happen. And he was like using it to be part of his thing. And I was like, oh man, that's so cool. And so
he's a warrior. He's just like, I think, you know, that's such, it's like you say, I mean, what an amazing experience that just, and to be that confident in your own ability to be able to lean into the faulty gear to just go, I'm going to make this work for me and create this unique sound tonight that'll probably never happen again.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love that. You've worked with quite an eclectic mix over the last 20 years. So you say, you know, you've done some hip hop stuff. I saw 50 Cent came up on the list of people that you've worked with.
Yeah.
And you know, and then, you know, Tedeschi Trucks band. So you've gone from, you know, very sort of, you know, rootsy Americana to hip hop. I mean, is that just, you know, do you just accept it all and like sort of, you know, bring it on, or, you know, how do you even? I'm kind of amazed that you've managed to have such a diverse, you know, list of people to work with.
I mean, the root of that is that I'm a fan of just music, you know, and I listen to a wide variety of music. And I don't know, it's funny because people ask me that and it doesn't seem out of the ordinary to me just because I listen to all that music and, you know, I'm kind of like obsessive about creating. So when I hear like a trap beat, I want to go home and like learn about why that felt that way. You know, like I heard this Burna Boy track. I don't even know if you guys know who that is, but he's like huge right now. And I heard that one song and I was like, oh man, it's amazing. And I went home and tried to make a beat like that. You know, this is all in like a few weeks ago. I had a friend that I'm working with, Modest Yahoo, and he was like, man, if you can make something like that. And so I was like, oh man. So I made like 5 tracks. I'm like, okay, I got to get that energy. I've always just wanted to chase that. Like whenever I hear something cool, I want to chase like how they made that. That goes back to when I was a kid. Like I remember looking at the Thriller album, the Michael Jackson albums, you know, Off the Wall, Thriller, and being like, who is this? Like, who's making these sounds? You know, I wanted to know everything about what the producer did, what's the engineer doing, like, who arranged the horns, like, what makes this happen? You know, I've always been so curious about that stuff, and it's always been like an exciting thing for me. So when Soulive got our first record deal, and got to be in the studio with some like legendary musician. We had Fred Wesley arranging the horns, and we had Bob Brockman producing and engineering. I mean, I would get there to the studio. I was so excited to be in the studio. I'd be there from the moment they'd let me in to like they'd kick me out, and I wanted to know everything about everything, you know. So that's really where it started as far as producing for me. Well, it started before that, but that was when I caught the bug and just wanted to make records all the time, you know.
The drums, those break beats that have gone right through all of the stuff that you've been involved with. Yeah. And it, again, for me, it takes me back to sort of, you've got that real kind of 60s soul vibe to the drum, and it sets the scene, I think, for everything that's above it. It's exciting, like, you know, it's always a sense of energy. I love drummers that kind of, you know, play in that style. It just gives a certain energy to the tune. It's almost like you can almost put anything on top of that and it's going to be good. Yeah,
that's true. The drums are so important. I mean, to me, in producing records, it's like that's the hardest thing, is getting the drums right. At least in my taste for my records. Like, so I've gotten to work with like the best guys, you know, Adam Deitch and Alan Evans and Otis McDonald. You know, those guys they're the best, you know.
I'm going to move on to talking about gear. Yes. But in fact, no, let's talk about gear now, and then we'll finish the interview by sort of talking about what 2023 has got for you. So, gear-wise, I was intrigued to hear that, you know, the Soulive stuff is Stratty. In my head, I've got you with this kind of like, you know, big box kind of jazz guitar playing that style. But
so I didn't actually play a Strat in Soulive. It was just leading up to that. I had always played a Strat. I think I had a PRS for a while, but like when I was a kid, like that was my instrument, was playing a 90s Strat. And then once I got in Soulive, I was like, oh, I should probably get a semi-hollow. And that was how that was born.
So yeah, let's do the journey then through the gear in terms of amps and guitars and pedals, and I'm always intrigued. When a guitar player can really sense that an instrument has unlocked or inspired something to come out of them that maybe, you know, might not have happened had it not been that instrument on that day.
Yeah, totally. Well,
so take us through your instrument journey.
You know, when I was a kid, I just was like, what did Hendrix play? What did Stevie Ray play? So that was like how the Strat thing happened. And then when I got into the Soulive thing, I was like, okay, I need that hollow body sound, that Benson thing, the Wes Montgomery, I started learning like how to do all the like. So I wanted to figure that out, you know, and then I ended up going from a big like George Benson model Ibanez to a 335, and then I actually developed a model with Ibanez that was really a variation of an AS200, and I ended up putting like a coil tap in that one because I realized that the single coil thing that with Soulive, I started going back and forth between wanting this like single coil kind of like funk sound, because I was also listening to like the James Brown rhythm guitar players. So when we'd switch from like me taking a solo to like Neil taking a solo, I wanted to be able to go. And I couldn't get that to happen with the humbucker thing for some reason. I mean, if I did, I had to like hit a pedal and do this, that, and the other. So I tried doing the coil tap. And then I got back into, when I started making my own solo records, I got into having an SG and a Strat so when I was on the road, I'd go back and forth between the two, and like the Strat, that's when I discovered the beauty of the single coil with the fuzz pedal, which for some reason I had never used fuzz pedals before that, and I kind of was in the studio making Blood from a Stone, and I was like, oh dude, like that's a thing. And then I got to know Doyle Bramhall a little bit, and he started telling me all about the fuzz pedal journey of like the voltage and draining the batteries and all this crap, you know, that was so cool. And I was like, oh, okay, fuzz pedal, single coil, that combination. And it's, you know, all along, it's all about this certain frequency or vibration that would make me play cooler things. You know, that was what I'm always searching for. So it was like when I was on tour with my band, I started finding a different kind of path, you know, where I was like, oh man, that sustained, like searing note, you know, that like, and you know, what's the funny thing is my pedal board started getting smaller, you know, because I had this massive pedal board for a while with Soulive as that evolved, you know. In the beginning, it was just guitar into an amp. I started adding. And then I realized, okay, there's just like 3 or 4 things that I really need to get that sound. Obviously a great amp, and the right guitar with the right setup. And so then I started playing solid body guitars again, the Strat, the SG. And I was like, well, what if I could try to build a guitar that really was both those things? Because then after a while I was flying all the time. I was like, is there a way to make one, you know, guitar? So that was when I started talking to Dangelico and Dave Coltai, and I told him, you know, my idea, and he was like, well, let's work on it. Let's see what we can do. So that was the evolution into this guitar, was to try to combine those things that and try to hit the mark with like 3 or 4 guitars that I would take, like maybe bringing on the road, and try to really mash it into one.
We might as well. I mean, I definitely want to talk about your fuzz journey, just purely and simply because I think I'm at the beginning of the fuzz journey at the moment, and I just want to know what ones to buy. So I'm going to pick your brains. Yes. But so this is based on the D'Angelico kind of Bedford shape, which is their sort of double cut. But it's a beautiful guitar with a set through neck and some stunning kind of appointments. This sort of combination. Looks like a sort of maple and walnut kind of neck. But I guess the thing that stands out most are these pickups that you've put in here.
Yeah.
Are these pickups that you designed with Seymour Duncan, or were these pickups that they made already?
Yes. So MJ at Seymour Duncan wired the pickups. It was really a thing that Dave Coltai and I worked on for a long time, honestly. And, you know, I had been playing a Silver Sky, which I really liked those pickups. I'd been playing some early 60s style Strats, and I was playing my SG and my 335, and I just kept going back and forth about what I wanted to do with this guitar. So they actually took apart a bunch of pickups and took apart some guitars, and you know, they really took the kind of guttural you know, explanations that I had of like, I would FaceTime with him, and I'd be like, see, when I hit that fuzz pedal and then I do this, like, why does that happen? You know, and he would explain to me, oh, well, that's the Alnico, something. And they would go back and be like, try this one. And so we tried a lot. I knew that I wanted to make it a single coil pickup, but the other thing was that it looked really cool to be in this humbucker casing, and that looked better with this guitar. So, you know, it was partly aesthetic, and then once we discovered that when you actually put a single coil pickup and wire it in this casing, there is a different sound, you know? So it kind of created a unique thing that has like that kind of, you know, spank of a Strat, you know? You know? Like all that funky stuff, but then like, you know, and then it also has, you know, with a fuzz on it. Right. But then you can still get like the Soulive. You know? And so once we discovered that combination, and I can't remember off the top of my head what the difference is between this one and this one.
Dave Coltai can tell you. Alnico 2 at the neck, Alnico 5 at the bridge.
Thank you. I have 5
You're
and 2.
very welcome.
I couldn't remember which was which. But you know what was so cool about making this guitar? It was like the silver lining to the pandemic. You know, I had a few silver linings to the pandemic, which is that I could spend all this time in my studio and make a bunch of music and record a bunch of music. But the other one was that I got to spend time making this guitar and go back and forth and find the thing that I couldn't really explain to him. It was more like, okay, let's try this, let's try that, let's try this, including the fret wiring, which we tried a bunch of things, and the neck
silver
shape.
nickel frets.
What's that?
You've gone silver nickel frets. It's just, this is. I mean, there's a few features on here that I mean, firstly, I think if a company like, or when you find out that Seymour Duncan have engineers there where you can use all the ridiculous words that we use as guitar players to describe how we feel something sounds.
Yeah.
Woofy and woolly and organic and chewy and all these ridiculous words.
Yeah.
But when an engineer goes, I know what you mean, and can translate that into a practical design, it does make working with those companies so much easier.
Oh yeah.
And I love as you go through the ages in guitar and amp history, the happy accidents that happen. You know, you take a single coil, you put it in a humbucker casing for no reason other than it's a visual thing,
right?
Or maybe the guitar just wasn't built to fit a single coil in it or whatever.
Yeah.
And you invent a thing by accident, and the thing actually does sound a little different, and it's super, super cool. I was saying on the fret wire, you know, I think there's a we deal with a Danish brand called Hansen that use these kind of German silver nickel kind of frets as well, and it's a thing, you know. I think it's like you can really, if you play enough guitars, you can begin to go, yeah, those are the frets that I like, and I can't quite tell you what it is, but I don't want stainless steel or whatever, you know, I want those. But
I would not have been able to explain that if they hadn't said try this, try this, try that. you know. And interestingly enough, I actually originally wanted to do vintage, like really small frets, because on a Strat I really liked that, you know. But then when I tried it, it didn't feel right on this neck, you know what I mean? So it's like one of those things too, where, you know, you might order a guitar and be like, oh yeah, I'm definitely gonna want that, but then when it's there, so I got to actually try that, and I was like, you know, well, that's not it. And then with, like, the first one they sent had larger frets, so we ended up kind of in the middle, which works, which I love. And now, you know, it took this process to understand why, you know, and I still don't know why, but at least to understand that that's what works for this guitar. You know, there was what I've done in the past when you know, making a custom guitar or even doing a signature model before, was like, oh yeah, this and this is probably it, and then that's it. This one, you know, I got to try so many iterations and spend time dialing it in, which was a very, you know, it was a luxury.
I've always felt that, you know, one of the things that, you know, D'Angelico sort of undeniably get right is this beautiful sort of Art Deco throwback to maybe the 1940s or 1950s from, you know, sort of New York. Or I think they capture that in the sort of detail on the headstock and the, you know, the way they do the pick guards and stuff. Was that a conscious decision of yours that drew you to D'Angelico as well? Some sort of sense that it was a throwback to perhaps an era you were particularly fond of from a guitar?
Absolutely. I mean, I always loved their guitars, you know, in the semi-hollow world, or the hollow bodies, I mean, the old jazz boxes. And when I got with them, you know, they had started making these solid body guitars, and that was so interesting to me, because I wanted to do something that wasn't like the guitar, you know. I didn't want to have like the Strat or the SG, that my version of that. I really wanted to find something that was new, you know. And they do make this Brighton model, but it's it looks classic to me, but it's new at the same time, you know what I mean? Which I thought was so cool. And it's just classy. It's got that New York vibe. It's got that that classic D'Angelico thing, but it's in a new body shape. And they also, you know, the classic headstock, but they shrunk it down a little bit. And yeah, it's got that like New York 50s kind of thing.
So I have to ask, so I can go and try one myself as well. What fuzz pedal did you end up with, or which fuzz pedals do you have? Because I must admit, I will play a fuzz pedal one day and go, this is the one. Yeah. And then for some reason the next day it's just not the one. And it's so hard with fuzz to just find one that you're consistently, you know, works for you.
That's great. You know, that's exactly my issue, is that I've had so many, and I'll play it one time and be like, oh, that's incredible. And that same thing. So the one that's the most consistent for me, and it's actually a new pedal, it's the MXR Super Badass Variac Fuzz. It's a mouthful.
Right.
It's so great, and part of the reason, going back to the whole like Doyle thing, he you know, has all these old fuzz pedals, and he uses these battery things that basically keep the battery at a certain level, because part of what it is the amount of voltage it's using, or what is affecting the sound of the fuzz, and make kind of that spatter kind of thing happens. And so this one has a variable voltage knob, so you can have like, so it's let me see. So like this is with like the full like 15 volts, and then if I change it to 5 volts, so I move it around, but I like it at the 15.
So that's interesting. I mean, it's brilliant news that it's MXR, because you can get those pedals. Anybody watching this video anywhere in the world should be able to get an MXR pedal. I mean, and George Trips, I assume George Trips was something to do with the design on that, and you know what he doesn't know about fuzzes isn't worth knowing. But I'm interested. A lot of those classic you talk about whether it's Doyle or Eric Johnson or, the guys that are really, really known for using fuzz typically would have gone for the battery that was a bit drained, a bit low on juice, but you like it juiced up with like double battery basically.
Right. Well, I use them for different things, but what I've found, I like both, but when it's on the higher voltage and the gain's kind of down, because I'm not necessarily someone who's going fuzz all the way. I just love the way that that certain frequency kind of sticks out. You know what I mean? And the fuzz does that more than an overdrive. An overdrive will kind of, it's more of a warmer, and I use that too, but that fuzz, it's that kind of frequency. Yeah, when you have it on the lower voltage, it's just breaking it up more, and there's more like sputter, which also is really cool. And I like doing that one. I'll use that setting with a phaser pedal if I want to go really like Hendrix out. But yeah, I found that I like just a touch of that fuzz with the higher voltage. Like if you listen, my album, always, like every solo has that tone. I just found that tone, and I was kind of like, oh, this is cool. And it worked really well for like layering solos, which is something I kind of got into. I mean, I've always been into it, but on that album, I consciously, like the first song that I did, I played a solo that was really simple, and I went back and harmonized it. And then throughout the whole album, after that, I was like, oh, that's a cool, fun way to solo. And it also makes you think more melodically when you're laying down the initial solo, if you know that you're going to have to like harmonize it later. So that kind of became this like sound that I just dug into, was kind of that fuzz, but just with the gain like kind of down. And it just works really cool as like a layered guitar thing, kind of like how Stevie Wonder used to layer the Moog synth stuff. I kind of started doing that with my guitars.
Oh, I mean, Always it's my favorite album of yours.
Thank you.
And again, I think I get for someone who I think clearly took a few albums before they were really confident enough to sing on something. Yeah. Your voice is so good. It's just like, it's almost just, it just works. I love the way it's mixed as well. And there's a slightly ethereal sense to how it's mixed, and it's just a great album. I mean, anybody who likes music, let alone guitar music, should probably go and listen to that. It's a really
thank you.
Really great.
I have to give a shout out to Otis McDonald, who produced it with me. And the entire record was made during the pandemic of just he and I sending tracks back and forth. Wow. And it was also kind of like when we got to know each other during this time. And it was like I was writing these songs about having a family and starting a family, and he had a 1-year-old son at the time, and my son was just about to be born. It was like this whole process that we kind of built this album together. And
it doesn't sound like an album where it sounds like an album where you were all vibing off each other. It doesn't sound like an album where you're like, I've recorded a track and I email it and wait for a few days, get something back. That's amazing.
Thank you. And that really, so I would put down generally like a drum loop and a bass. I would play some bass and some guitar and the basic vocal. I would send him that. He would lay like some amazing drums and spice it with some other little things, and in certain cases add background vocals, in certain cases play bass as well. I mean, there were certain songs where I'd just play, like the first song we ever did, Man and Me, which we did for like a compilation. This is before we knew we were making an album. I just sent him an acoustic guitar with me singing to a click, and he sent back, and I was like, yeah, see if you can do something with this. And when he sent it back, I literally like fell over, like, 'cause he put drums and bass and piano and background vocals and like all this stuff, and it sound like you said, it sounded like not only a band, the band. Like because we had this whole discussion about Levon Helm and the band. Sent me that back, and I was like, oh my god. Like, so we just I was like, we need to make an album. He was like, yes we do. So I started sending him the same kind of thing. Silence was the next song we did, where I just sent him like piano, vocal, and guitar, and he built a track around it. And And then during the pandemic, it's funny because, you know, I don't know if you remember, but in the beginning of the pandemic, Zoom was not this. Like Zoom was like crappy effects pedals. So like we learned about Zoom, we started doing that, and then we found this thing called Pedal, which is like spelled like pedal, where we could start creating and see each other and hear each other in live action. So we started doing it that way too, where I could watch him do the drums, and then he'd send me the file, and I'd put bass and listen to what we'd listen to each other. We could mix. So it became this process that we got to do. We got to do it, you know, pretty much all like in my sweatpants and flip flops in my own studio, which was kind of again another silver lining to the pandemic.
And you obviously toured the album when the lockdown kind of finished.
Yeah.
And I guess that, you know, was that the bulk of 2022 was just doing, touring that album?
Yeah, we did a ton of shows. We toured all over the U.S., opened for Dave Matthews on a bunch of dates, and did a co-bill with Son Little, which was great. And yeah, we did a lot, man. It was, and I put together, you know, I was fortunate to have a killer band, The Assembly, and Otis, aka Joe Bigale, came out and played bass on the tour, and Curtis Kelly, James the Eighth, and Will Blades. I was able to put together like just such a great band. They all can sing really great. So it was great, and we'll do it again. I'm kind of shifting now into doing a trio thing for a while, but The Assembly will live on for sure.
And I guess, you know, everyone in the UK will want to know, might we see you over here this year?
Yeah, we're working on it. If so, it'll most likely be with the new project that I'm actually putting out, which is the Krasno Moore project with Stanton Moore on drums. We're working on hopefully a fall tour. I don't want to promise that, but our album is coming out in a couple weeks on Concord.
Oh, wow.
Jazz. Yeah, and we're touring. Our tour in the U.S. starts in like a week.
What is, you know, you got me excited now. I mean, how does that sound relative to you know, the last couple of albums? Is it in a similar vein or a departure?
So it's a departure. It's a departure and a return at the same time. So it's it's an organ trio record, you know. So we recorded it pretty much live. There's a couple overdubs. Last summer, Stanton and I got together. He and I do an organ trio thing every year down at Jazz Fest New Orleans. And this year it went so great. We were like, man, we got to make a record, you know? And we decided while we were sitting there, you know, talking about it, that we would do a concept album. And we were hanging out with both of our wives, and they're like, we started discussing concepts, and we were like, well, what if we did a cover album of all our favorite female singers? And so we got together, we made a playlist of songs and booked a few days at Levon Helm's place. We ended up booking a gig, and we're like, okay, we'll record the few days for the gig and then play the gig. So we did a Nina Simone tune, Aretha Franklin, we did a Billie Eilish tune, we did Amy Winehouse, we did a Casey Musgrave. So we did like modern artists, classic artists, and we did it all in the organ trio kind of treatment with Eric Finland on organ, who's just like a genius organ player. And yeah, so that's it. And we pretty much cut it mostly live. Jim Scott mixed it out here in California. And then, yeah, it's coming out March 17th.
And you think you'll probably tour that album, will you?
Yeah, yeah, we're actually touring starting next week. We have like a run at the Blue Note in New York City. We're playing most of the U.S. between March and April. And the plan is to get over to Europe before the end of the year.
I always think if there's one thing that you can sort of guarantee is you know, if you start throwing in songs that people are familiar with,
yeah,
all of a sudden, you know, there's that instant audience, you know, reaction and sort of participation in the sort of gig. So I bet you're looking forward to that. That'll be a really fun tour.
Yeah, we've been getting a good response on it, and we had some guests. Corey Henry played on the song we just released, and Branford Marsalis is on there, and Robert Randolph. It was a fun process. You know, it was again like a departure from my last couple records, because, you know, you know, doing Always, you know, was like this piece together, write the song, you know, layer the parts back and forth, mix and add, and this one was like, let's just put some mics on some amps in a room and on the drums and hit record and not overthink it. So you know, that
vibe and that energy, that's so cool, man. I mean, if you, you know, I'm slightly joking and slightly being half serious, but if you need some help finding good venues to play in our neck of the woods in England, get your, you know, booking guy to call me, and I'm sure we can try and help.
I would love
we'd all
that.
love to come and see a show.
I'm long overdue to get back over. You know, Soulive used to come, you know, every year or two, and but I haven't gone on my own. I don't think ever. Now that I think about it.
Yeah, I don't think you've ever done a solo.
Yeah, it's always been Soulive or Lettuce. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I can guarantee you there'll be at least 3 people in the audience. I can promise you that.
Yeah. I would love that.
But look, man, I mean, it's been a pleasure, a real absolute pleasure to talk to you. I really wish you all the best with the new music. I hope your guitar is super popular. If anybody's watching this and wants to know more about the guitar, they can look in the description below this video, and we're listing it on our site. You can come to the store and try one if you want to. But yeah, please, if we get the chance to see you later this year or next year and you want to come into the studio and we can, you know, dive a bit more into the playing and stuff, that would be amazing.
I would absolutely love it.
It honestly has been a genuine joy to discover your music over the last 2 or 3 years, and I can only say again, if you're, you know, for guitar players or anybody out there listening, go and check some of it out, because it's really, really great stuff.
Thanks again for having me.
What's the plan for the rest of the day? Have you got to go and get little one from daycare at some point?
Yeah, later on this afternoon. You know, I'm actually learning a stack of music. I'm playing as part of the Love Rocks band, which is it's a big charity event we do every March. And the house band is Will Lee on bass, Paul Schaefer on keys, Steve Gadd on drums, Sean Pelton as well, the SNL horns. It's like, and so we're backing up a huge list: Gary Clark, Sheryl Crow, James Taylor, John Mayer's on the gig. So anyway, and a million other people that I'm forgetting. But it's so I have to learn like 40 songs in the next like 4 or 5 days. That are not the easiest song. I mean, some of them are, you know, they're not crazy, but I have to get the parts right, you know, because I'm playing with these people that I don't want to disappoint James Taylor at all.
I can imagine. Are you gonna try and write the charts out, or do you just learn it? And...
Luckily, we have the charts, you know, and we have recordings and charts. It's a really organized gig, so like that part of it is like, you know. So I have like my iPad over here. I've got this whole system. This is year 6, I think, or maybe even 7.
Okay.
I think year 6. So I mean, it's honestly it's such a fun gig, and it's a lot of work, but it's so cool to get to play with all these amazing folks.
What's the what charity is it in aid of?
I'm sorry, say again.
You said it was a charity gig.
Oh yeah, so it's part of the charity is called God's Love We Deliver, and the show's called Love Rocks. Basically, the charity feeds thousands of people a day in the New York area. It delivers meals to people that are it started out as mostly AIDS and cancer patients. It was pretty much everybody, anyone that is too sick to feed themselves, and they like, there's a massive kitchen in downtown New York where they build the meals around people's health issues, and it's all like super healthy food. So yeah, it's a really, really cool charity. And we've raised a ton of money over the last six years. So yeah,
that's amazing.
Really cool
well,
thing.
You know, credit to you and everyone else that's appearing at that, because you know, it's amazing that you can, you know, still find the time to do stuff like that as well.
Yeah,
so, look,
it's awesome. And then
it's been a. Sorry, go on.
I was gonna say our tour starts the next day with Stan so it's gonna be a little nutty. I leave for a little while, so.
It's all good. That's what coffee was made for.
Yeah,
you'll be fine.
Exactly.
You'll be fine. Well, look, it really has been a real privilege to chat to you for a little bit. And like I said, I hope we get to see you at some point in the future in Andertons.
Me too. And
so thank you very much, and good luck with everything.
Thank you so much for having me.